Someone asked me what kind of customer Superside have served. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to say what are all the types that Superside work with. What I can tell is some examples of brands that I have worked with showing what I have done for them with work that is already public. The list is very long. And regarding industries, I could say that I have worked with public sector companies, beauty, consulting ones, crypto, financial, and many others. But I feel that my main focus have been on technology companies. And this is what I put the focus on in this video, the work that I have done for this. And what do I consider that it is important for you to have as a skill to work with these kind of companies based on my experience. So one of the type of work that I tend to receive when I was a creative and now that I am a creative lead, it is social ads. This project that I did for Grammarly, where their request was to illustrate the different types of writing style that people have. Each of those styles would be presented as an archetype, same as in a tarot card. Our work was to represent them using their visual style, the one that they have a few years ago. Has been some years since we did this project. Follow the style and come up with some sort of characters that could give a clear representation of these archetypes. You can receive different requests, and it depends also on what moment in the evolution of the company it is that you're working with them. Because, for example, when we were with Webflow, they started having a brand, and during our partnership, they rebranded to what they are now. And we were there in that process where first we started making some illustration library that they use on their social media, that they use also for, making other assets. So there was like a resource that they could use for ebooks, for social media, for different kind of assets. But then with the change in brand, we contributed to making some of their icons, some of their webinars, and different assets that they give us very, very clear instructions, and we just needed to follow those, but come up with new concepts that could look cohesive with the ones that they already have that they gave us as samples. So this is another example of what would we do or what that I have done in Superside for technology companies. Another example is Vimeo. They have requested us to make a lot of emails, blog, imagery, certifications, and they have like a lot of assets that we just take advantage of them and adapt to create new ones. But the most important thing about all these companies is that they have a clear guidance on what do they want to look like, and they give us very clear instructions on how to achieve a similar look and feel. It is a very meticulous work to have to come up with things that are similar in style, but having these guidelines and having these systems, it helps us a lot to come up with these successful assets that are on brand. But also we have to work with companies that they just develop their brand guidelines and they still have gaps that could be filled. Like, for example, not having illustration guidelines or not having photography guidelines. And it is a beautiful work for us to help them to get these new assets and these new resources to enrich the type of assets that they do. This is the process that we did with Sisense. When they came to us, they have a super beautiful logo with very nice colors and some ways of visually representing their elements. But during our partnership, they gave us freedom for us to propose what do we think that they could do to improve how they represent themselves and how they made their assets. In that process, we helped them to create photography using AI. So we start making some tests and play with some colors and define some scenarios. And once we have done some of these this test and see that this photography style was working for them, we took the next step and created a whole AI photography library where they just needed to drag and drop these and put them on their assets. And with supersized custom bright models, we train a model for them to use on Figma where they could make their own AI images without too much prompting, just with really simple prompting because it was relying on a already trained model. And they could start playing and have their own images for their day-to-day need, which it was amazing for them. And they were super happy to be able to have and create their own images without having to all the time ask us to do them, even though we still do some images for them and keep making assets because sometimes they needed very specific things and more complex outcomes. It was a super good step for them. And the other success was to create their illustration style. They already have the resources, they already have the visual aesthetic of the brand. So when they decided by our suggestions to take a step forward and also define how the illustration would look, it was a very simple process. We first presented some mood boards, then we received some feedback about the possible look and feel of this, and then we started making some tests. It was almost instantly that we reached to a point where they were happy with the illustration style, and that helped us to create several illustrations that they then use in publications on their webpage. We animated some of them and they use on webinars, and the result of this, it was super cool, and it feels very good and nice to have the trust of a customer that wants you to propose things and give them suggestions on what do you think that their brand should go. So we're really grateful for that. And if I have to say what is the main skill that someone that is doing this kind of work should have, at least in my experience, it is branding knowledge. Because all of these brands that I have mentioned, they have very different aesthetic and they have very different needs. So being able to understand at what part of the evolution their brand is and what is the most convenient for them to be someone that follows very clear instructions or be someone that needs to go beyond the brief and propose what you consider that can be an improvement. That is something that it is the key for success, in my opinion, in this kind of work. So that raises a question that it is, what do you do when you get a customer that doesn't have a clear brand guideline, doesn't have too much details about how their assets are going to look? They just have font, colors, and a logo, and that's it. And they want you to start producing things right away. If you want to know about this and how do I approach this kind of situation, let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to make another video about that. Thank you.